Welcome to Craig's Gun Channel. In today's video, we'll take a look at the history and development of the Henry U.S. Survival AR7 rifle. It's not often that I have the opportunity to dive into other things that I have interests in, so I'm taking advantage of the opportunity that this firearm provides to bring some of those other interests together. The reason I can do this is that to understand why this rifle exists takes a bit of a step back in time of military and aviation history. The First World War started in 1914 and was a jumble of military doctrines that had existed for hundreds of years, mixed with the terrifying modern weapons that were developed in the quickly increasing modern industrial age. This conflict saw the use of regimented battle lines with enemy combatants facing off with each other devolve into protracted military engagements with both sides building trenches and other battlements for defense. Long protracted battle lines resulted and the machine gun became a common battlefield weapon. As the conflict grew, the development of armored vehicles to try to break through enemy lines began, first as armored cars, then tracked vehicles able to navigate ground that had been chewed up by battle or fortified with defenses. This war also saw the first significant use of aircraft as weapons of war. These relatively fragile craft were first used as aerial reconnaissance and for artillery spotting. Early pilots began to carry handheld bombs and firearms to try to take action against the enemy, and eventually, those early efforts developed into true fighting machines as aircraft were pressed into armed service as bombers, and then as fighter craft to defend against the new bomber threat. At the time, the men who piloted these early fighting aircraft were more likely to die from accidents with the planes themselves, as opposed to actual combat, and there was not a lot of thought about measures to ensure the survival of a pilot or crew should their plane be shot down. In fact, most early pilots were not even issued parachutes, as it was thought to reduce the morale of the pilots. However, as with all military armaments, aircraft technology was growing fast. By the end of the First War in 1918, the capabilities of the aircraft and the survivability of their crews in combat was drastically increasing. By the time World War II began in 1939, military doctrine was evolving and the speed of war had drastically increased. The German blitzkrieg tactics changed thinking, making the idea of long-term static defense lines obsolete. Likewise, military aviation had grown by leaps and bounds. The survivability of aircrews greatly increased, meaning that if an aircraft were shot down, the likelihood the crew could survive was much greater, and there were many pilots and aircrews that were shot down that were able to be recovered and put back into service. By the time the Second World War ended, the jet age was beginning, and the complexities of the aircraft, as well as the reality of what the newly envisioned battlefields would be, again changed tactical thinking. Military doctrine began to take into account the vast scope of modern combat, with aircraft being deployed thousands of miles away from where they were kept. Unlike in prior wars, where aircraft that were shot down would crash relatively close to where the ground battle was occurring, it was now clear that pilots and crews could set down hundreds if not thousands of miles away. These airmen would need to provide for their own survivability for extended lengths of time. Equipment for aircrews now had to include for food, water, and defense in the event that they were forced down far from rescue. Serious thought was put into weapons for self-defense as well as hunting in those situations. However, space and weight were still significant considerations, so a variety of customized weapon systems were developed. One of these was the AR7, a lightweight, bolt-action rifle designed by Eugene Stoner in 1954 while he was employed by Armalite, a division of Fairchild Engine and Airplane Corporation. The AR7 was a bolt-action rifle chambered in .22 Hornet constructed of lightweight plastics and aluminum. It could be broken down into three main components, the stock, barrel, and receiver, with the barrel and receiver able to fit into the back of the stock. Armalite developed the weapon to fit the specific needs of the Air Force's XB-70 high-altitude supersonic bomber project. The Air Force procured 12 models for testing and formally adopted the AR-5 into service in 1956 as the MA-1 to replace the existing M4 and M6 survival weapons already in service. However, shortly thereafter, the advent of Soviet high-altitude anti-aircraft missiles, as well as the development of practical intercontinental ballistic missiles by the United States, made the XB-70 project obsolete, and the entire program was canceled in 1961 before official production of the bomber series was started. The Air Force subsequently decided that existing stores of M4 and M6 rifles were sufficient to meet their needs, and so any further interest in Armalite's AR-5 by the military ended. In 1959, Armalite, in an effort to still capitalize on the developmental work already put into the AR-5, further developed the platform into a semi-automatic rifle intended for commercial sales, creating the AR7 Explorer Survival Rifle. The AR7 was a direct blowback-operated semi-automatic rifle chambered in .22 long rifle. Armalite wisely determined that for its intended commercial application, .22 long rifle was a better option than .22 Hornet. The rifle maintained the breakdown functionality, allowing for the barrel, receiver, and stock to all be separated, with the receiver and barrel all fitting inside the stock of the rifle. It was constructed primarily of aluminum. Even the barrel was aluminum, with a steel lining sleeve for the bore. The bolt was also steel. The stock was made of lightweight plastic and was foam-filled. It had a rear peep sight that was slightly adjustable for elevation, and the front sight was a drift-adjustable blade. Overall, it was 35 inches long when assembled, and when broken down and stored in the stock, measured just over 16 inches. It weighed about 2.5 pounds. Not only did this make it portable, but the entire weapon was light enough that it could float for some time if accidentally dropped in water. I'm not sure how much utility that actually provided, but it was a selling point often made. It was marketed as a lightweight survival rifle for use in foraging small game for food. While the AR7 was designed primarily for commercial sales, there was some limited military interest in the design. Israel purchased them for issue to their pilots. However, they were heavily modified versions that ditched the plastic stock for a telescoping wire type that used an FAL pistol grip and a shortened barrel with front sights based on the K98 Mauser. These were imported back into the United States in limited quantities at some point, and they're highly sought after by collectors today. Armalite produced the AR7 from 1959 through 1973, at which time Charter Arms began producing it. Charter Arms produced it from 1973 through 1990, with the design remaining essentially unchanged. However, they did produce a pistol version of it, the Explorer II, for a few years in an effort to improve sales. In 1990, Survival Arms took up production, and they manufactured it for 7 years, at which time Henry Repeating Arms began producing it, and they're still the current manufacturer of the rifle today. The current Henry AR7 survival rifle is conceptually the same as what Armalite originally produced. However, they have made quite a few changes. The barrel is now a steel-sleeved composite plastic design, and the stock has been changed to a more durable ABS plastic. The original plastics that were used were prone to cracking, and the move to ABS largely corrects that. The internal design of the stock itself has been changed as well, and it can now hold the barrel, the receiver, with the magazine inserted, and 2 spare magazines for a total of 3, whereas the original, you had to remove the magazine from the receiver to store it, and only 1 could be held within the stock. The receiver itself retains the rear peep sight that has 2 options for the size of the peep sight. However, an integral 3/8 inch scope rail now sits on top. The front sight blade is now an easy-to-see orange plastic, and finally they improved the magazines to increase reliability. The rifle's overall length of 35 inches, as well as its stored size of just over 16 inches, remains unchanged. However, the new revised stock is slightly wider, and the overall weight increased to 3.5 pounds. But it still does float, at least for a while, and to provide better water resistance, it's now covered in a Teflon-based water-resistant coating. The AR7 has a spotty history when it comes to reliability. They were known to be of fairly high quality when they were made by Armalite. However, that quality began to suffer under Charter Arms and Survival Arms, and they were known to suffer from reliability issues. The primary reason for that is the design itself, which does not use a feed ramp for the chamber, but instead uses a ramp that's built into the magazine. 2 metal tabs on the top of the magazine, in conjunction with the feed ramp on the forward part, are intended to guide the cartridges into the chamber. Any damage to the magazine, which is made of sheet steel, would cause inconsistent feeding. Also, any wear on the locking lug of the magazine itself, or on the corresponding catch on the receiver, would cause it to tilt slightly, which also caused feed issues. Henry redesigned the magazine and incorporated a spring on the side to assist in feeding, and this has resulted in the modern versions being much more reliable. It's currently available in the traditional black as well as 2 camo finishes, and has an MSRP of $335 to $408 depending on the finish that's chosen. Of course, street prices are generally less than that. I hope that this information is of value, and if you liked the video, I would ask that you hit the like button and subscribe if you want to continue to see more like this. I value your comments and feedback, and as always, until next time, stay safe.